So off we go. We are on to this week's project. Install help desk ticketing system software on Raspberry Pi. It is a new objective in Core 2, 220.11.02. Given a scenario, implement best practices associated with documentation and support systems information management. The specific objective is help ticketing systems, and we covered all of the bullets under there and sub bullets 2 weeks ago. I'm not going through all that again. All right, what do we need for hardware? So if you're looking to learn this, you're not setting up a production environment. A Raspberry Pi 3 or Raspberry Pi 4, an enclosure and a power supply. In theory, the software will run just fine on a Raspberry 2, on Raspberry 2 hardware. But you have to install it on a 64-bit operating system, and a 64-bit operating system needs a 64-bit CPU. The zeros and the twos don't have 64-bit CPUs. They've only got 32-bit CPUs, so they're out of the running. It's got to be a 3 or a 4. I'm running it on a 4 with 2 gigs right now. It works fine on a 1 gig machine. You know, unless you're supporting 400 agents all trying to use the system at the same time. For learning purposes, a 16 gig micro SD card is fine if you're going to do this in a production environment. 128 gig or 256 gig if you're playing with micro SDs. I wouldn't use a micro SD in a production environment. We've talked about that in the past. Use a real storage device, an external SSD, an external hard drive, best speed you can get. If you use a 16 gig micro SD card as a learning thing, it's fine. After all of the installation and everything is done, you'll have about 11 gigs of free space to work with. That's plenty to learn on. As I said, it's a 2-port process. We're just going to talk about the first part, installing, configuring, and updating Ubuntu. So let me talk about that part now, and then we'll get into part 2 here. Let me do this. So what you're going to do is get yourself a micro SD card that you need. Prep your hardware while you're playing with this stuff, and don't power it on until you're ready. If you haven't already downloaded the Raspberry Pi imaging tool, go to raspberrypi.com, go to their download area, and download the Raspberry Pi imaging tool. And that's where I'm going to start with, and I'll share that with you because I know you and I like you. There it comes. All right, so when you launch the Raspberry Pi Imager for the first time, you can do these in any order, doesn't matter. Choose your OS, choose your storage. I don't have a micro SD card in there, so there is no storage to select from. You won't be able to continue until you do that. You see the right button here is grayed out. But here's what I want to get you through, the choose OS. Which OS do I need? We're not going to use Raspberry Pi. We're going to use Ubuntu. So that's under other general purpose OS. And you can see there's a handful of categories, including Ubuntu ones. Okay, so we'll pick on Ubuntu. And there's a bunch of Ubuntus in here. The one that we know works right now is not the 22s. It may work on version 22, but the documentation that I had, only 20 existed at the time. That's the one that I used, and it works. So we've got a pair of 20.04s to pick between. One is a 32-bit server. Can't do it on a 32-bit OS. Got to be done on a 64-bit OS. So this is the choice that we know works. 64-bit server with long-term support, that's LTS, version 20.04.4. So you'll select that. Then you'll pick your storage device. And then don't use the gear system here to try to preset anything up. It won't work and it may mangle things. Just click the right button and let it do its thing. It's a longer write than writing Raspberry Pi OS. So while it's doing its thing, now you get your Raspberry Pi ready. Guess we can stop sharing that. So get it in its housing. Don't you can connect the power supply to it, but don't plug the power supply in or don't use its switch. If that's not an option for you, don't plug it in yet. Of course, when you're done, you're going to put the micro SD card in the slot on the underside. I'm doing this because it's an old one. This is an old 2. It didn't even have a micro SD. It's not a 2. This is an A. Goodness gracious. It used a full-size SD. Get yourself a network connection. Ideally, you start out with a hardwired connection. You can do a Wi-Fi connection later if you choose, but get a wire going from here to one of the switch ports on your router for that initial connection. And let them sit there waiting for your burn to complete. All right, your burn is complete. Pull your micro SD card out of your burner, pop it into your Raspberry Pi, power it up, and ignore it for a while. Okay, first of all, it's going to come up, and then it's going to resize your media to use the whole space, and then reboot. And then it's going to do its update, its internal operating system update thing, which is, again, going to take somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. And then there's a couple manual things you want to do. No particular order for doing these things. First of all, you want to install an SSH server. Unlike Raspberry Pi, it doesn't support automatically an SSH connection. So you sudo apt install open SSH -server, all one word, enter, it goes buzz, 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 grind, 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 does what it does, and it's done. And now it supports SSH connections, and you don't have to do any configuration or anything like that. You might later because you want to make it more secure, but it takes care of that. How do I do that if I don't have SSH? You're going to need a regular keyboard and mouse and monitor and open up a terminal session. All right. The default password and account name when you set this up for the first time is Ubuntu and Ubuntu, all lowercase. Account name Ubuntu, password Ubuntu. And when you log in for the first time, it's going to make you change the password. And it's a 3-step. It says, first of all, type in the existing password. You got to be saying, what kind of question is that? I just typed it to get logged in. Nevertheless, you got to prove it. So, okay, put in Ubuntu and then put in your new password. My system, I used Raspberry because that's the password of all my internal Raspberry Pis that aren't vulnerable to attack from the outside, or I don't care if they get attacked from the outside. Next thing to do is to do a manual update and upgrade, just like you do hopefully every week or so on a Raspberry Pi. Sudo apt update, ampersand, ampersand, or on a new line, sudo apt -y upgrade. Walk away. If you get repeating fail messages, then Ubuntu hasn't completed its own automatic backup or update rather. So Control-C to stop your attempted process and walk away. Come back and try it again a little later. Wait half-hour increments. Hours should be total more than you need. All right, so now you've updated and upgraded. You've changed the password. You've installed an open SSH server. It's done. Reboot it to make sure all the changes and everything have taken effect, and you are now ready to log in. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to log in, and then we can start actually installing osTicket. PuTTY Ubuntu at 192.168.1.104. I think I set that to today. Yes. And password is Raspberry, RASPBERRY. Enter. There we go. Okay, we're logged in. Let's share. All right, I'm going to do everything with you real time today. One of 3 things is going to happen. We're going to finish it. We're not going to finish it because A, Dave can't talk anymore, or B, because it's taking longer than I hoped. But this is a freshly installed and updated Ubuntu running on Raspberry Pi. Couple things that I can do to check this thing out. How much free memory do I have in there? Oh, this is a 4 gig machine. Memory 3.8 gigs, blah, blah, blah. Okay. How much hard drive space do I have? df minus h, 11 gigs on this thing, MMC block 0P2. That's the micro SD card. All right. And in the real world, I would probably change the name. The default name of the server is Ubuntu, and I could have, should have, would have changed that. All right. So there's easy follow, step-by-step presentation. We may not have time to cover it all, but if we don't, just download my notes or try and follow that tutorial, and everything is in there. Same steps that I'm following here. You will do. See if I can move that over and not. Yeah, we'll see. So even though you have just done an update, I'm going to do this. It doesn't take too long. Because I've done an update, I did my my update and upgrade this morning. Always, before you install a new program, sudo apt update. You don't have to do upgrade, but you do have to update. And update's pretty quick, even if your system's been running around for a long time. And while that happens, now the last time I did one for real on this machine, total time, I also did upgrade, took 10 minutes. I'm sorry, that was how much time it took to do after I did my initial install. You can see here it took less than a minute to do an update. That's cool. Now, the first step is we're going to install a MySQL database. We talked a little bit about databases a couple of weeks ago. We'll call this step 2. And the process is very simple. It takes less than a minute. A SQL database. There's a lot of SQL databases out there. We didn't talk about that a couple of weeks ago. I was writing a course on it a couple of weeks ago. So here's the command that we're going to run: sudo apt install MariaDB. It's a clone of Oracle database server, the Oracle SQL database server. And I head it off with the -y, so it doesn't say, hey, do you want me to do this? Yes or no. Enter. And it takes about 50 seconds according to my notes. So I'll head down here to the next step while we're doing for that. The next thing that we're going to do is, after it's installed, we're going to secure it. Now it goes by the name MySQL, MySQL, after it's installed. Sometimes you call it MariaDB, sometimes you call it MySQL, but again, because it's a clone of the MySQL server from Oracle database, when we're dealing with software and not the package, everything refers to it as MySQL, and it says, that's my name if anybody wants to talk to me, any program, any process, or whatever. So let's secure it. Enter current password, or enter for none. Let me check here. Set root password. Root is the MariaDB admin, not the Ubuntu account. Okay, so you're setting up a password for a user, an administrator of the MariaDB or the MySQL server. So I'm using Raspberry, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. You already have a root password set. You can safely answer. Set the root password ensures nobody says that. You already have a root password set, so you can safely answer no. Change the root password, yes. New password, Raspberry, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. Okay, next thing, he asked me if I want to remove anonymous users. In the real world, this will disallow remote logins. But here I want to be able to do remote login. So no, I will not remove anonymous servers here. It says it defaults to yes. I don't want to do that. I want to say no. How about allowing the root account to log in remotely? Yes or no? In the real world, probably not. You may have an exception reason for that. But in here, I do want to be able to log in as root from remotely. And again, that's root for the database, not for the Ubuntu system. So disallow root login, no. Now, if there's any test databases in here, should I get rid of them? Yes, we don't need any test databases. Cool. Now, in the steps that I've just taken, some of them were security oriented. When you issue a command to change security steps, processes, authorizations, whatever, it doesn't happen. What you have to do is wipe out the privilege table because that table is in memory. And when you wipe it out, that will cause the database server to go read the configuration files and put the information from those configuration files into the privilege table that's in memory. So yes, I do want to reload the privilege tables now. Yes. And okay, we've installed our Maria database. We've secured it. And that's what all these questions were about. And that completes secure setup. Now what we want to do is change the authentication plugin to be able to log in as a normal user with root credentials. Don't sweat what it means, just follow the steps here. Sudo MySQL -u for user root. So MySQL is a command that's used to access and manage the MySQL server. And so we're saying allow the user account root to be able to log into this thing. When you run the sudo MySQL command, you are in the MySQL administration interface. And so we logged in as user root here. So I'm sitting at the MySQL or MariaDB process, at the interface, right? Everything we do is command line here. So I'm going to put in a couple of commands. These are just commands that are necessary. Come here, you. For later purposes, I think is probably the best way to say this. So we're going to run a command called update. I'm not going to read all this to you and explain it. Just do it. Okay. No error messages is what you want from here. And once again, we're going to flush the privilege table, but this time we're doing it from within the Maria database management console. So it has to be done with a command. I want you to notice something kind of interesting here with this command and with this previous command. The last character of that command is a semicolon. The last character of this command is a semicolon. You get a pattern here? Every command when you're in the MySQL database management interface must end with a semicolon. Flush privileges, okay. And then to get out of here, you can do this in uppercase or lowercase, quit, semicolon. And now we're out. If I'd said quit without the sem, I'd say, what are you talking about? Go away. So let us now test it. And what the test here is, can the root account log in and will he be prompted for the password? So I'm not going to use sudo anymore. I'm just going to say MySQL user root prompt for password. If I don't say -p, it'll try to log in without a password and it will fail and it won't prompt me for one. So by adding -p, this forces it to prompt for the password. Okay, what's the password? I set it as raspberry, RASPBERRY. I'm back in. Hey, what happens if we type quit to get out of here? That's a test. The test is successful. We can log in successfully using the root management account and use the password. All right, type quit. Oh, it let me out without the semicolon. Unusual exception. Sorry about that. We have a database server. Now we need a database for the osTicket system so that it can track its tickets. So we're going to log back in again. RASPBERRY. All this is step-by-step documented in my download notes. These ones have to have semicolons, I guarantee. This is part of a class that I've been writing and teaching and learning a lot more about SQL databases. So we're going to create database. It's called osTicket_DB. Bam. Get it up here and then we'll say what we're going to do. We're setting up access for an account called osTicket_user. You'll never use that account. He'll get totally automated and be used in the background by the program, by the osTicket program. And notice we've got a strong password here. If you don't like that password, before you hit the enter on this line, put in another password in there and make sure you document it somewhere. Here again, a good reason for the sake of learning this installation, just accepting the defaults because it's already in documentation that you have. All right, we've done a new security thing. We've granted privileges to this user account. So we got to flush the privilege table. And we're done. Quit out of there. We are done with the database stuff. We've created a database server. We've created a database administrator. We've secured the database, and we've created a database user account, which will operate in the background by other programs. So now we need a web server. That one's quick and painless. We've installed web servers before. In fact, we've installed this web server before. Sudo apt install Apache 2 -y, so we don't get prompt for the yes or no. It's about a 30-second installation. And when you install it on Ubuntu, it's a little bit different than when you install it on Raspberry Pi. In Raspberry Pi, it's automatically registered with the startup systems, and so it will start every time. Here, it won't. You have to manually start it up whenever you want to run it. I don't want to do that. I want to automate it so that every time I boot up, that happens. Guess what we're going to do next? Sip tea. How we doing? We're only 20 minutes in. We are doing good. All right. So first of all, we've got to start the service. It's been installed, but it's not running at all yet. So that's an easy thing to do. This is a system STL thing. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we did a show on journal CTL. It tracks logs created by programs that use the system control system of CTL thing. Well, here's one. This thing is now making logs, or at least it's about to. So we'll say sudo system control, start Apache 2. And now the Apache web server is making logs, and I can see those logs with journal CTL. That was weeks ago. How are we supposed to remember that, Dave? You're right. I barely remembered it. I didn't take notes on it, though. Okay, so the service is enabled. It's now enabled to, never mind. Next, I want to set it up. It started, but I want to set it up so that it will start every time I boot. It's a very long process for this next command. But we're going to use system control again, but instead of start, we're going to say enable. Now I'm going to do a countdown. I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, enter, and then I want you to start counting until it's done. You may get up to about 1,000. Here we go. 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's done. All right, we're done, and we've installed an Apache web server, and we've enabled it so that it starts up every time Ubuntu boots up. Hey, we're making half. That's 2 of the pieces of software out of 4 that need to be installed on our Ubuntu system. The next one is PHP. Now, we've done a PHP installation a year plus ago. We used PHP to interact with a Raspberry Pi so that we could talk to its GPIO pins using a, that's almost visible. Sorry, I know I'm here up here in the upper corner here, but got GPIO pins there. And we used a web server and the PHP control language to turn on and off LEDs. And the big problem that I had with this installation and for the last couple months and why I failed so many times was because the version of PHP that's required by osTicket to run wasn't available or installable from in a Raspberry Pi. Okay, everything that I did and twisted and torqued around with Raspberry Pi OS, I could not get version PHP 8.x. It was only 7.x, and that doesn't work. Until I ran into this one, it doesn't come with PHP 8, but it does understand how to add a repository for PHP 8. So that's what we're going to do. First of all, we got to do a fresh update. Because whenever you install new software, we probably should have done it before Apache, but I've done this in the past. I knew I could get away with it. But this one, you've got to do a fresh update. So here goes 25 seconds. And now we have to install a pile of support. Oh, that was quick. I guess that 25 seconds was because of what I did last time I had to do this. That's all right. All right, now we're going to install a pile of programs and support dependencies and things like that. So sudo apt install, and then each of these items separated by a space is another package that's getting installed. You will see what we're going to do with some of these, but I'm not going to explain them all. We're following the steps necessary to make the end happen. And that's when we'll do a lot more explaining when we get to the end project. Okay, now we need to add a repository that has PHP 8 in it. And this is one of those ones that says we have to press enter when prompted. I think we could probably head this off with a -y, but their tutorial left it off, and sometimes they have it in and sometimes they don't. So I'm just going to follow their tutorial and see how it goes. So we're going to sudo add apt repository. That's a special command. And then here's the repository. It's a PPA. And it's a directory called PHP in some thing. Okay, so here comes the press enter to continue or control C to cancel adding it. Enter. And it's happening. So once there's a repository that's got the right version of PHP, then we can install PHP and some extensions. Now, whenever you add a repository, you have to do an update. It's got to be registered with your system. So here comes another update. This one's quick, 5 seconds. Sudo apt update. Sure, more than 5 seconds. There it goes, about 5. And then we got a couple different commands to add PHP. First of all is some dependency, the core program and the core dependency. This one takes about a minute. Sudo apt install PHP 8.0, PHP 8.0-common, and don't prompt me with yes or no, please. The next thing that we're going to do is add a bunch of dependencies. It's going to be a sudo apt install and a list of a bunch of dependency files. And that one's going to take, from my previous install efforts, a minute 45. So I'm getting that ready to go. Guess I can copy that. And once we do these two things, install the 2 PHP stuff, we can test it. And if the test goes okay, we are 3 for 4. We have all of the support files that we need in order to install osTicket. So the final step is going to be installing osTicket itself. A couple of steps. They're not too painful, too awful long. All right. I vamped for about a minute. That was pretty good. So here comes the next one. A little shy of 2 minutes. Here's the big list. There's all kinds of PHP 8 dependencies, IMAP, because why do you think we have IMAP built into here? What is IMAP? Anybody remember? It's one of the incoming email protocols because you're going to be able to submit a ticket via email and all kinds of other type supporters. Here's the support piece that enables it to work with the MySQL database. All right, let's hit the enter here so I don't have to buzz. We finished it off with the -y. Happened too quick, but again, so it doesn't prompt me for yes or no. And now I got to vamp for a minute 45. I'm going to stop share for a minute and just talk head for a minute here. Well, that goes buzz, 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 grind, grind, grind. The next thing that we're going to do when that completes is we're going to run a simple test command to see if PHP is installed and functioning. It's a really simple command. You say PHP space -v for verify. And we will get some kind of result back from that. It'll be hopefully a successful result. And if not, it's going to give us some kind of error message, and then we can go chase that down and figure out what happened. What's going on screen right now is it's creating a bunch of config files, creating config file this and config file that. Now it's setting up the config files. We're at 62%. Yeah. And once that verify is good, then we're ready to install osTicket. And osTicket, of course, is not in any standard repository. They update it too frequently, and repositories are notorious for how long they take to get their stuff updated. And so we're going to download the current version of osTicket, which is going to come down as a zip file, and then we'll unzip it and keep going from there. All right, project is complete. Share it back, or that install is complete. Share, click over here, and here we go. Dave's head's back up in the corner. All right, so let's test PHP. Stop it. PHP space -v. Hey, no error messages. So can't ask for more than that. Step 5, download and install osTicket on Ubuntu 20.04. By the way, this also works on 18.04 if you, for some reason, have an ancient version or want to install an ancient version. So we're going to download a zip file, and then we're going to unzip it. Oh, wait a minute. Let's do some planning ahead. You can't unzip it until you get the unzipper. So we're going to need the download program that they like. Curl isn't built into Ubuntu, and neither is unzip. So let's get those two programs that we'll need to install this. Sudo apt install the curl package, the wget package, and the unzip package. Don't prompt me for yes or no. 15 seconds on this one. This next part that's coming up, if you follow the tutorial, it will hang you. It will hang you up. Because what the tutorial says, let me see if I can show this to you. Yeah, I'm going to change shares here. Stop the share on this. Start the share on this. And share screen this. So these are my outline documents. And what they have is a gray box that shows these 3 lines just like this. And this is the one that threw me. I couldn't figure out. I understand that you can start a command with grep, but when you end it with a backslash, and you can start a command with cut, but I don't know what the backslash does. And you can start a command with wget, but it's got to be followed by some stuff. So that threw me. So I stared at it for a while, tried to figure some stuff out, didn't have it. Called Michael Smyer. Hey, Michael, check out this tutorial. Give me a hand figuring that out. And he stared at it and he was stumped. And then he did a head slap and told me the obvious. And I said, oh God, yes, I know this. I just haven't run into it in so long. When people post tutorials and commands that don't fit in the boxes that they're using or whatever, they put them on different lines. And then they put this backslash to indicate that this text is supposed to follow this on the same command line. Ah, okay. So if I take those 3 things, get rid of the backslashes, and put them all together, I wind up with this line. Yeah, there was another thing missing there, the curl -s up here. That was all part of it too, another line. So there's 4 lines in there, not 3. So you put them all together, you turn them into this line, and yeah, it ends with a minus and nothing after the minus, but that needs to be there. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to unshare here, take you back over to my shared terminal. And now we paste that into there, and there's all those 4 lines. And did I make any notes about how long this takes? Yeah, so a really long line like that, hopefully you're not surprised that it's going to take a little time. How much time are you going to take? Oh, it's done. 5 seconds. Now, let's see what happened. Basically that. We basically did all that double 2 lines of code and instruction to download a zip file. All right, well, so there it is. So now we need to unzip it because we need the real code out of there. And the unzipper in Linux is really cool because it supports wildcards. So I can say, what if this were now v1.17.0 or v1.16.4, I could unzip it. I could say unzip osTicket, get all this case sensitive stuff right, minus v1.17.0.zip. But it says, you know what? If you do this, I will unzip everything, every file, every zip file that you have in here that starts OS capital ticket minus V and anything after that. So I love this command in the Linux arena. And it's unzipping and unzipping and unzipping. And oh my gosh, is that going to be a horrible, terrible mess to work with? No, it made a folder here called osTicket, and everything that it unzipped, it put in that folder or in subfolders. So ls, os, in fact, you know what? That's the only thing that's, oh gosh. Now I got to manually type everything here. I got it. Okay, there we go. I hit the tab key. ls osTicket, and the only thing that you see in there is 2 more folders. So what I want to do is I want to take these 2 folders. I want to take this whole folder structure here, osTicket and everything in and under it, and I want to move it. How you do this command matters. Okay, follow these instructions carefully. I just had you look at something by staying in my home folder. That's important, or this next command won't work. If you go into another folder and look around, cool, but this command won't work unless you come back to your home folder. So follow these steps carefully, or understand what's going on so you can get back to the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sudo command because I'm going to transfer or move these files and folders and everything else to a place where my account doesn't have powers unless it uses sudo. So I'm going to say sudo osTicket. That's the source. And then the destination is going to, sudo mv, move. And then I'm going to send it to whack var, whack www. Okay, I'm there. Now we're going to copy a sample config file into an actual config file. There's a sample config file already in here. Let me see if I can show you. I don't know how much stuff it has. Way too much stuff in here, but there's a file here called lsost sample config. Okay, that file I'm going to copy into a real config file with this command, sudo copy the name of that sample config file to ostconfig php. Done. Now we got to change the ownership of the appropriate folder here. This is where security gets set up, and this is where if you decide that you're going to use an alternative directory for your installation, you're going to have to start back at this step and play around with appropriate security. So should I stay here to do this? It doesn't matter because it uses a full path. All right. So I'm going to change the ownership of a particular folder and every folder in and under it with this command. We're going to sudo change owner -r, that's recursive, to the user called www.data, to the group called www.data, and this is the name of the folder that we're going to make those 2 things the owners of. Okay. They now own everything in and under whack var, whack www. That's okay. Now we got to kill the default Apache web page. If you try to go to the web server on this page and you want to get to the osTicket system, you won't be able to because there's a default page that was set up when the Apache server was installed. Now here's another one of those situations where the tutorial had 3 separate commands on 3 different lines, and that's okay. They can be run individually. What I did is I took them out and combined them together into a single command and separated the 3 independent commands with double ampersands. So I said sudo this command ampersand ampersand, which means and then sudo this command and then sudo this command, which is going to include restart. So what we're doing is we're making some changes to the files that Apache 2 uses. Apache 2 is in memory, and so it won't know about those changes unless we restart it. So here goes, hit the big enter key. If you follow the original tutorial, then there's 3 lines, just copy and paste each of the 3 lines and off you go. I'm looking at that. System restart. You're going to whine at me and make me reload just for safe. Fine. System, CTL, reload, Apache 2. Should not have to do that, but it doesn't hurt. Oh, fine. Give me my password. Raspberry, RASPBERRY. Okay. Step 6, configure the Apache server some more. All right, so there's configuration files for the Apache server, and it has to now be set up to recognize the osTicket system and realize that it's going to be integrated with that. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace, well, let's see here. Let's start by, original is going to be, no, replace this with this. We're going to start by editing a configuration file. And the way they want to do it is to say sudo vim it. I'm going to sudo nano it because that's the one I understand. But I left it in my instructions. So if you go into my tutorial, I copied it straight from theirs and I didn't change vim to nano. Use vim if you like vim. Use nano if you like nano. Paste all these contents. It starts with virtual host in some brackets and ends with virtual host in some brackets with whack virtual host. And then the instructions are a little bit funky because before all this stuff, it says there's a couple things that you need to change in here. So, okay, let's go back up and see what we're going to change here. It says, note, replace osTicket.computingforgeeks.com with your domain name. So here is server name, osTicket.computing.forgeeks.com. We're going to change that to the name of our server. Now, if this server is available online and you've made a domain for it and you're using dynamic DNS, you put in the appropriate DNS name for this thing. The name of my server in here, its local, actual, real, honest to goodness name is Ubuntu. So that's what I'm going to change it to. This change is okay, doesn't cause any problems. And then the next thing it says is change var www.osTicket whack upload. Let's find that right here. The document root. It says change that to wherever you want your document root to be. Now, if you make it anywhere in or under www, it'll work fine. But if you put it anyplace else, then you've got to go back and do that change ownership and some other rights and permission stuff. You're here to learn it, leave it as is, works great. Tastes great, less filling. All right, anything else that I had to do in there that requires anything you need to know about? Nope, save it. So Control X, you want to save this? Yes. Is this where you want to save it to? Yes. All right. So we made a new configuration file. Whenever you have an include folder under where Apache looks for stuff, it says, oh, okay, anything that's in this folder is a configuration file that I should read and implement. You can make configuration files in there all day long with any name you want, just by virtue of the fact that they're in an include folder that's somewhere under the document root bar www. It'll get read. All right. So let's do this. This was another one of those ones where they had multiple lines, and I decided to leave it as multiple lines just to demonstrate a difference. So now we've got to get Apache to recognize the changes. We start with the A2 Insight, read that file. Okay. And then we get this thing. You have to do system reload. So the tutorial is saying system restart. This update may have forced us to use reload instead. So, okay, I'm easy. Let me just I'm going to run it as a restart here and see if there's any positive results. And then I'll run it again as a reload. All right, no error messages, but I'll still reload just because it seems to make it happy. But I didn't do that on any of my previous installs. All right, now a test. We're going to check out Apache control and right, there's so many control commands. We've got system control and we have journal control we talked about a couple weeks ago. Well, Apache has an Apache control. So sudo Apache control -T. Hey, no error messages. Syntax is okay. So what it did is it sent a message to the web server using a particular using a particular syntax, and it says, "Yep, I buy that." So good. We're halfway home. Let's do one more restart on it, or two. Yeah, we did it in advance. They talked us through. No, they do restart again. So okay, I'll do restart. I don't think we ever needed to do that reload. Okay, we done here? osTicket is now installed. We're done. There's only one thing that we got to do to know. Let's start by quitting out of the terminal. We don't need that anymore. All we got to do, children, is to open a browser. Okay, we got to use 192.168.1.104 today. There we go. That's what you should see. And so this is the first time. At this point, we would now have to go in and do the initial configuration, then we can start loading tickets, and we would do that with the continue button here. But this is the really good news here. Shiny green check marks beside all the required stuff and all the recommended stuff. So that's it. That took us 1 hour with my explanations and talking and yammering. There wasn't a lot in between there. So plan on 40, 45 minutes if you follow the steps step by step.